Few words before starting. I want to thank the organizer for inviting me not only to present the work we are doing in Cyprus, but also for asking me to open this symposium. I'm honored and thankful for being here with you all, sharing our common passion for graffiti. So to start my presentation, it's not going to be. Just a moment.
Push it into PowerPoint. Okay, I just put that screen.
So to start my presentation, we need to make a trip and move from the northwest of Europe until its southern west end, from one island to another, so that I hope you will feel a bit at home. The best way to do so was to follow one of the numerous pilgrims and travelers who, across the centuries, crossed Europe to reach the Near East and the Holy Land. Our guide is a French silk merchant, Jacques Lesage, who left the way on March 1518 and started his trip to Jerusalem. After visiting Rome and other Italian shrines, he sailed off to Jerusalem from Venice along a bustling route created and exploited by the Republic of Venice simply by connecting the ports of its silk possession in Greece and Cyprus. So Jacques reached Cyprus in July, landing in Paphos first, then Limassol on the south coast to reach Famagusta. From here, by land, he arrived in the capital Nicosia on the 2nd of September 1518. Tired from the long trip on donkey's back, he seeks refreshment in the city. Finally, he managed to have breakfast and enjoy the capital, first visiting the church of Santa Sofia, described as a very beautiful little church, and adding that many pilgrims have made their marks and set their names on the walls. I saw the name of Jean Poitiers of Mons near one of the entrances. Today, we can still see some of the graffiti mentioned by Lesage on the facade doors of the former cathedral. His mention is the only one we have about graffiti for the medieval and early modern period in Cyprus. From his words, the presence of graffiti is a normal element for which he does not show disapproval. Actually, it is pretty expected, since the cathedral is the most representative place of the city and such a central landmark of the Latin presence and rule in Cyprus. This figure is even more relevant for us today because beyond noticing the graffiti, he even left one. His name was visible at least until the beginning of the 20th century on the Franciscan Church of Famagusta, as reported by Camille Enlard during his surveys. Jacques Lesage then is a crucial source to confirm once again that graffiti in the past were a widespread and tolerated practice, to the point that he left his mark too on a monument. Moreover, they were not considered illicit or as act of vandalism. Nevertheless, in Cyprus, vandalism performed through graffiti has also been attested for past periods. We are talking about historic vandalism that has its proper name, damnatio memoriae. Damnatio memoriae, meaning condemnation of memory, dates back to antiquity and represents an act of deliberately and sometimes violently erasing a person's memory from an official document. In medieval and early modern Cyprus, it is possible to observe this practice performed through deep scratches line, cancelling the face of a demon or a donor depicted on frescoes. Even though these lines do not represent a proper graphic notation with a specific meaning in itself, their presence testifies the perception and interaction of past people with the fresco figurations. Moreover, they confirm how, beyond icons, the cult of images characteristic of the Orthodox world was applied to frescoes figuration that were perceived not as a simple depictions, but as a bearer of the figure's essence. An unpopular donor, possibly Latin, represented in a Byzantine church, or the demons of the Last Judgment are the favorite objects for this practice. Beyond these borderline examples, Cypriot graffiti preserves a rich graphic variety of forms, characterized by the simultaneous presence of textual and pictorial inscriptions. Textual graffiti are present in 5 alphabets, while pictorial graffiti range from very detailed figures to abstract motifs and compositions. Graffiti appear to fulfill the expressive needs of local and visitors from different communities with different social positions and backgrounds. Western nobles and local priests, sailors and travelers left their marks and messages, testifying the multicultural and multigraphic character of the island. Living a graffiti represents primarily a graphic interaction to enforce someone's presence in a specific place. In this sense, writing becomes a form of self-affirmation and self-representation within a specific environment. Beyond that, so far, 3 main functions have been identified across Cypriot graffiti corpus: recording an event, expressing devotion, and requesting protection. Commemorative graffiti are among the most widespread in Cyprus, with the primary function of affirming the presence of a person in a specific place. They usually show the author's name or an identifying symbol. In the textual form, such graffiti may present elements that include the date, name, social position, origin, and the reason for the visit. In a few cases, Latin graffiti presents a typical formula hic fuit to stress the writer's passage. Apart from the textual form, the memory of the passage can be also expressed with pictorial graffiti. Identity marks, such as coat of arms, indicates the visitor's identity through other elements. Commemorative graffiti may also record other events, such as death and birth. This notation testifies the bond between the community and the church, perceived as a repository of the collective memory, as demonstrated by Veronique Flesch for the chapel of San Sebastiano in Arborio in Italy. In addition to the commemorative function, graffiti in religious buildings often have devotional function. In my opinion, the best definition is that of prayers made solid in stone, coined by Matthew Champion. Just as individual prayers are personal and intimate, aiming to connect with the sacred in their way, so are devotional graffiti, which express and assert the materiality of this practice within the space. Devotional graffiti may include a name or identity mark, and as it is for the commemorative one, but is their location to determine the function. They are located in relevant sacred space, traced near a sense figuration or relics. Very similar to devotional graffiti are the votive ones. They also express devotion, but through the practice of vows. Ship graffiti, for instance, are generally interpreted as voto or ex voto, depending on the will to ask for protection during a forthcoming sea trip or to thanks for escaping a shipwreck or a storm, fulfilling in an original way the deeply rooted and still active practice of tamata, offerings. The last function detected across the Cypriot graffiti corpus is the ritual protective one. I do not need to spend many words on this category since it has been developed and extensively studied and debated here in the UK. What I want to underline is how what you observed and described for the British context has been crucial while analyzing the Cypriot material. Unfortunately, we cannot benefit from the variety of material and written sources you have, but working and cross-checking graffiti with other evidence is giving really good results. The systematic documentation of this form of graffiti, mostly compassed from designs and Pentalpha, is ongoing. This analysis aims to verify the recurrence and location of the forms mentioned above to provide a comprehensive picture of their potential use and value within the religious context. From a preliminary analysis of the material collected so far, it seems that the symbols worked similarly on both islands, despite the distance and the very different contexts. Of course, the mentioned 3 functions, but must not be taken as rigid and isolated boxes. These functions can be identified and declined in various ways, testifying the personal and intimate perception of the different and the differentiated interaction that people of the past had with the buildings. In this sense, the analysis of graffiti helps to reveal the intimate and not otherwise documented character of the various religious buildings. This overview will summarize our current knowledge of the Cypriot graffiti heritage. What I would like to share with you now is what there is behind that, how we arrived to get a first idea of the Cypriot graffiti phenomenon. I will now take you behind the scenes, showing the work my team and I are doing in the field of Cypriot graffiti. And to do so, I need to do a very short digression, just a few words about how it started. I first got in touch with graffiti 19 years ago, and as an archaeologist, I have struggled to find a way to describe and analyze my material. Like everyone, I found my way, mixing and matching my expertise in paleography, epigraphy, building archaeology, and so on, but with very upsetting results. At a certain point, I started realizing that as graffiti scholars, we are probably the laziest one. The study of historic graffiti started between the 18th and 19th century, after the discovery of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Since then, we haven't managed yet to define standards, create a cataloging structure, and agreed upon what graffiti are. And it's understandable. So far, the study of historic graffiti has benefited from the contribution of other disciplines, borrowing their methodologies and approaches for data creation and sharing. In some cases, the results can be good, and I'm thinking about the textual graffiti, where the epigraphic methodology can be applied, even if it presents some limits. But what about all the rest? In Cyprus, for example, around 70% of the corpus is composed of pictorial graffiti. It is convenient to take the easy road by including graffiti within paleography or epigraphy, using their well-structured and tested methodologies, while pretending that all the rest, pictorial graffiti, is a sort of residual material, not really worth if we cannot read or understand it. And this is already happening in some academic environments. However, I'm sure we all know that this is not the right way. Graffiti need, even more, they deserve to have a specific methodology, a shared and standardized system for their analysis to finally establish graffiti study as an independent scientific discipline. This is not merely a theoretical academic activity, but it also, and above all, has practical implications. The lack of a specific discipline capable of framing and defining the phenomenon of historic graffiti prevents the authorities from taking measures to protect and preserve this graphic heritage. I know that is different here in the UK. Thanks to your work, historical graffiti is now widely recognized by the authorities and the society as a valuable source, but the situation is very different in the rest of Europe. To pursue this ambitious goal, at least for what concerns the Cypriot context, we submitted the project that was funded and started this year in April, DigiGraph, Digitizing Graffiti Methodology and Definition for the Study of Cypriot Historic Graffiti. The project aims to provide a defined and tested methodology of reference while fostering the debates towards the establishment of graffiti as an independent discipline. Moreover, it will define the best practices for the documentation and study of Cypriot graffiti to be adopted by local authorities and stakeholders to preserve and promote the island's graffiti heritage. So the unavoidable first step for everyone getting involved with graffiti is to confront with the definition of graffiti itself, the most debated topic. Despite numerous attempts, it appears clear at the moment that it is only possible to give a partial definition of graffiti. While general lines can be spotted, like the use of surfaces not intended for writing, other aspects, such as the variety of forms, messages, and function across the centuries and in different geographical areas, make it challenging to frame. Moreover, the lack of a shared methodology and standards prevent the data exchange, creative fragmentation, and the impossibility of having a global and accurate view of the phenomenon. I think we are trying to define something we still don't know so well. We are trying to define such a vast phenomenon without having the right tools to describe it first. That is why I decided to change my approach, shifting the focus from the definition to the description. In my view, at this point, we can only describe the phenomenon as a first and necessary step towards its future definition. The description I developed is the following: that graffiti are graphic, so textual and pictorial archive, displayed on natural and anthropic spaces or objects on surfaces not intended for writing. Highlighting a very important aspect, from an archaeological point of view, graffiti stand on an interface, a sort of invisible layer that records the human interaction with a natural or anthropic space or object. This explains one of the main differences between graffiti and epigraphs, the temporal gap between the creation of the support and the making of graffiti. Graffiti, in fact, more than written artifacts, are material traces of immaterial practices, something in between tangible and intangible. After choosing the descriptive approach, the next step was to face such a multiformal material by finding a way, a methodology able to consider all these diverse graphic elements on the same level without favoring one form to the detriment of others. To overcome this gap, I focus on something other than the graffiti function or meaning that are the result of interpretation, therefore subjective. I search for measurable and more objective elements able to describe the communication mechanism undergoing in the graffiti. Benefiting from semiotics and semantics, it was possible to adapt richer and coach semiotic triangle about communication with the correspondent three elements defining graffiti mechanism of communication: form, content, and space. The endless variation and association within these three elements define case by case the function of every single graffito. I won't dwell on the theoretical description, but on a practical level, I'm sure we have all experienced how small variation, such as the location of a graffiti within a building or the graphic form used, defines the different meanings and function of graffiti. What is relevant is that playing with these three elements, we can describe the communicative mechanism and analyze the spatial interaction in a more objective and precise way. Moreover, the role of space, therefore, in a more practical way of the support with its material and immaterial implication emerged as fundamental in defining the graffiti function. This is, of course, already well known, but in terms of context, a concept that already includes interpretative elements from the beginning. The concept of space is more objective. It refers and enhances the strong connection between graffiti and their physical and material support, highlighting the relevance of a well-structured and efficient documentation of the support itself. Once we define on a theoretical level how this mechanism works and which are the constitutive elements of this process, we translated them into practice, describing the operational workflow. It is divided into three parts: documentation, analysis, and interpretation. For each phase, we consider the graffito per se as a graphic form and the space context. The first phase focuses on testing and defining the best solution for high quality, reliable, and transparent documentation of the single graffito and the site. The second phase deals with the analysis, therefore with the definition of analytical models able to describe and practically catalog the graffiti and the sites and buildings. This operation must foresee the presence of cataloging standards to guarantee quality data creation. Our references are the FAIR data principle and guidelines for creating findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. Once collected and analyzed, data can be interpreted based on the different combination of the three constitutive elements identified above: form, context, and space. Moreover, to keep track of all the passages defining and describing every part of the process and sharing the knowledge, a specific ontology has been developed. An ontology is a formal description of knowledge concerning a specific domain. By defining concept and their relationship semantically, complex processes can be addressed and described to share knowledge and have a more and deep structured vision of the domain. All this pretty theoretical work was finally translated in our graffiti database, the DigiGraph database. It still needs to be finalized. So what we are going to see is the demo version with dummy data. I'm sorry for that. It's the model we are running for the final test. It is organized precisely as shown on the workflow on two levels, the site context and the graffiti corpus. The opening page will show the data on two or more graphs. We are still defining this. One shows the distribution of the sites per districts, and the other the total amount of graffiti per site. A map of the island with georeference sites will show the location of the sites with a link connecting directly to the specific site. For what concerns the sites, we have tested two ways to document and visualize it. We realized 3D models with laser scanning and photogrammetry. And the second solution we adopted is the creation of panoramic pictures. The second system is so far the one we prefer. The main reason is that it is more manageable than a 3D model, and graffiti are easily detectable, while on 3D models, they are not visible so well. It is necessary to work and add further details because it's needed. You need to work and add further details on already heavy 3D files. In the future, though, we plan to test also the 3D GIS on one side to identify pros and cons and evaluate its feasibility based on the site's characteristics. The panoramic pictures have been embedded in the database in the part concerning the site description, which presents, as you can see, access to the panoramic navigation on top and the basic information about the sites. Below, the complete list of graffiti recorded on the site will be displayed with a link connected to the description of every graffiti. For each site, we also provide two plans to give an immediate visual articulation of the function of the buildings or site. As you can see in the map on your left, while the second map on the right shows the graffiti distribution within the site. We primarily work with the religious building, but the same can be applied to non-religious sites. This will help not only the navigation on the panoramic visualization of the site by knowing where graffiti are, but also to have a first impression of the graffiti distribution based on the space functions, a very preliminary step for the interpretation. Another way to access the graffiti will be through panoramic images. Thanks to the space partitions and hotspots, it will be possible to navigate the building and select the graffiti in specific areas. Specific links will then display the list of graffiti clusters and their description. Coming to the graffiti documentation, we tested and defined the best ways to document every graffiti based on its specific characteristics. So from traditional 2D imaging to RTI, in case scratches lines are not well visible, to a wide array of multispectral imaging for graffiti traced with pigments. Ladder scanning can be used too in case of graffiti clusters and superpositions. A further step will be to try an automated separation of overlapped graffiti by automatic recognition based on the characteristic of the furrow, but it's something to come. We also tested some non-invasive analysis of graffiti traced with pigments. Thanks to the digital microscope, we could see the brush strokes in detail, getting interesting insight into the tools used. We could also observe the pigment composition through the digital microscope and the fiber optical reflectance spectrometry, giving us all the pigments components. This is particularly useful for establishing the characteristic of the pigments and their origin. Then specific descriptors for graffiti have been defined, aiming to record the physical characteristic of the formal ones. Here you can see the back end of the database where we insert the data concerning the physical elements, such as the kind of support, making techniques, and the tools used, and the location within the building. To describe the formal characteristic of graffiti, specific types have been created. What you see is part of the different types identified within the Cypriot graffiti corpus. The list and all the database in general can at any moment be enriched with new classes and types. The innovative aspect, in my opinion, is that the database allows a multiple selection. Here you see the backend with two classes and, again, dummy data, so don't pay attention to the data so much. So you see the backend with two classes, and for every class, more than one option is selectable. Moreover, more than one class can be selected. And I will better explain how this works with an example in a while. I underlined many times across my presentation the need to follow standards, also so to have a common language to better describe and share the data within the scientific community. To do so, we decided to refer to the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus. The ID numbers you see here in the list of the textual classes are correspond to the record of the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus. Each class and types, when possible, have been mapped on the thesaurus so to provide a standard definition. Moreover, the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus also offers the possibility to see every element in its hierarchical position with the different domains of knowledge. In the backend, as you can see on the top, the reference to the thesaurus is provided by inserting the specific link for the classes and types when available. The mapping is still ongoing, and here you can see some classes and types of pictorial graffiti. A specific class then aims to provide descriptors for one of the most complex and problematic classes we find, geometrical forms and patterns. Here is the list of the shapes we have identified in Cypriot graffiti so far. As you can see, only a few types have the Getty ID number. Most forms are not present, but this does not interfere with their documentation, identification, and definition. So this is how every single graffiti will appear in the front end. Please, once again, ignore the entries and focus only on the descriptors because we are still in the testing phase with dummy data. So to see how it works practically, I prepared an example, a challenging one, which combines text and drawings, one of our nightmares. The problem is, in this case, that while the text can be precisely described using the epigraphic model, the pictorial part is usually just mentioned and described in a text field, making it challenging to spot pictorial elements during a general search. So for the text, we provide the transcription and translation, you can see here, and then we proceed with the specific description. So we will first say that is a composition, that is a class, and a cartouche, that is a type of the class. We will then use the classes for the textual description, selecting Greek for the textual, for the alphabets, Greek again for the language. And then, as I was saying before, we can select different types for the class of textual types. We can indicate that it's a formula. It's the correspondent in Greek of the ik, fuit, Latin. We have a date, and the name. And finally, we can define also the script that is cursive. We pass then to the description of the pictorial part. Here we will select cross from the class of geometrical form and patterns, holy lance and holy sponge from the class of religious objects, and red from the class of vegetal elements and patterns. In this way, we managed to identify and map all the elements present in the graffito without missing anything. Why is that important and innovative? Because in the search phase, if I search, for instance, all the graffiti with the cross or with the red, this graffiti will appear too, allowing to see better where and how specific elements were used in combination with what. Here you see an initial image of the search section of the front end. The final version will display all the classes with the possibility to select more than one class or specific type from different classes for the search. This represents one of the main achievements of the DigiGraph database, the possibility to map and track every single form without favoring text over pictorial elements. So we reached the end of my presentation. There are no real conclusion to my speech, which, more than a traditional presentation, was meant to be a starting point of discussion towards the definition of a specific methodology for the study of historic graffiti and the consequent establishment of historic graffiti study as an independent discipline, as it should be. This, of course, cannot be made by a single person or a small team, but it needs to be open to the scientific community and the scholars dealing with the topic, so with you all. My team and I are open and willing to collaborate with researchers and colleagues abroad. The only way to enhance and improve knowledge is by sharing it, as my team and I are doing. Moreover, on this slide, I take the opportunity to thank all and each of them for their support and contribution to this project, in general to the study, preservation and promotion of the Cypriot graffiti heritage. So to conclude, if you want and if you're willing, get in touch with us and let's continue the discussion. Many thanks for your attention.